Hello and welcome to another No Stress Distressings tutorial. This is tutorial number 5 and I wanted to show you some more background blending, but this time using a little bit of masking to add interest. So what I have right here, I have this vintage cream cardstock from Paper Tray Ink cut down to a 1/2 inch smaller on both sides than a standard size card. That way we can just mount it on a card base later, and that way we don't have to worry about getting the back all dirty. And the first thing I'm going to do, well actually the end goal with this is that I'm going to stamp my flower image, and the flower is going to be a different color than the background, but it's all going to be on one piece of cardstock. So first I'm going to ink up the entire background with the colors that I want the flower to be. Now you could just ink the part where the flower was going to be, but I want it to blend in really seamlessly and really look like it's all supposed to go together. So that's what I'm going to do first. So I have mustard seed, wild honey, and those would be the main colors for the flower. And then I also have some spiced marmalade and worn lipstick. And as usual, I just have my tools just hanging out on top of my distress inks, all ready and waiting for me, and that helps me just stay organized. So I'm going to take my lightest color first, this mustard seed, which is one of my very favorite colors, and just start working on to my paper. And you know, there's no real right way to do this. You can add as much or as little color as you want. Just get it where you like how it looks, and we'll be building more layers on top of it. So just try to keep the edges, see that they're kind of nice and fading out. That way they're easy to blend in other colors with. And I think I'm going to cover pretty much most of this card with at least a light layer of the mustard seed, concentrating most of the color down here where the flower is going to be. Okay, so I've added my mustard seed, and as you can see, I mean, it's a little blotchy, but it's not the finished card yet. Don't worry. You can always go back and add more in later. Next I'm going to add the wild honey, and I'm just going to be focusing this mostly where the flower is going to go. And then again around the edges of my card, because I want the edges to be darker. And that's just a general rule of thumb that I use, that the edges, especially the corners, are usually going to be the darkest areas of the card, because that's what makes it look most realistic. Okay, so now that I have my base done, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my flower. I could have technically stamped my flower any time in this process before, but I just wanted to have the bottom color laid down because it makes more sense to me to have it down first. So I'm just going to ink up my flower. I'm using Memento ink, but really you can use any ink that you want to that'll dry kind of quickly, because you don't want it to smear when we do the rest of the blending over the flower. So actually, before I do that, I'm going to slip my mouse pad underneath my paper, just for that little extra bounce, and stamp down and hope that it gives me a good impression. Alright, looks good. We did have a little bit of extra ink, and I found that this is a problem with this stamp, because these dents right here don't like to stay back and not get inked. But that's okay. We can add some ribbon to cover that up. So we'll take care of that, and then I'm not even going to ink it again. I'm just going to stamp it down on this piece of paper, and then we'll be able to have a mask to cut out. So I'm going to cut this out, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've cut out my mask, and before I mask off this area, what I just want to do is add some more of this wild honey color to the flower so that it really has this center nice and dark. Kind of just balance out the flower, make sure it's colored how I want it. Add some more dark, and now I'm going to go back in with the mustard seed and just kind of blend that out. So there is my flower, and now that I have my flower all done, I'm just going to take my mask, which is just cut out of simple typing paper, a scratched sheet of paper, and use some removable adhesive. This is from Tombow, and I love it. It works amazingly well. And it does roll off with your finger pretty easily, but it's great for masks because it'll stick to the mask really well and not to your project. So now we just have to line this up. And it's perfectly okay if some of this black line is showing, because the ink that you put over it isn't really going to show up anyways because black is darker. Next, what we're going to do is take this Spice Marmalade, which is a darker orange color, and work off the flower onto the card. And you just have to keep in mind during this whole process that it will always look amazing when you take the mask off, but at the time it might look kind of like crapola. So you just have to trust yourself to keep going and to make it how you want it. So I'm just starting on the flower and moving it off, kind of trying to get some ink out of the blending tool. This pad's a little bit dry. I should probably buy a refill for this one. And I can tell because it doesn't seem to be picking up as much ink with each tap on it. And you can see that I tap it a lot onto the pad just because I really like to have the perfect amount of ink so that I can have full control over what I'm doing on my card. Because as soon as you have to press really, really hard, you're losing control of your edges and you might end up with a harsh edge and things like that. So make sure you get this little piece right here. It's important. So that's good enough for now with the Spice Marmalade. Just making sure that the area around the flower is very orange, and that'll really make it pop. And then I'm going in with some worn lipstick, which this may be my favorite color of Distress ink, and I'm not really sure why, just because it's just gorgeous pink, and you can use it with so many different colors. You can use it with purples and yellows and oranges and even blues, and it just blends really well because it's a more transparent color than, say, mustard seed is. It doesn't cover things up, it just emphasizes what's underneath. So I'm just going to keep going with this worn lipstick, and I'll speed this part up. Now I'm actually going to take my pad itself and go back with the worn lipstick and really get some color on here. And it's okay if it's a little bit streaky. You can go back with your blending tool and blend out the streaks. But that really adds some pop, and I wanted to keep this card just pink and orange, so I don't want to add my reds in. Even though that would be a really cool look, it's not what I want for this card. So I'm just going to keep going back, blending out all of that ink that I just put on there. Okay, so now that I have all the ink on, it's time to reveal my beautiful masks. And you can see how much it just really pops, and I love that. When you get little, sometimes the mask, like if you didn't cut the mask exactly right, you get little marks along the edge of the flower where the ink was masked off where it wasn't supposed to be. But just go back with your blending tool and kind of help those edges be a little bit less sharp. And no one will even notice. Plus this part's going to be under ribbon anyways. So yeah, there we go. So this is the background, or this is the card. I think for the edges, I'm just going to go over them with my distressing tool, which you can see from my, I believe my 3rd video in this series. I go over distressing edges, and I'm just going to use that technique here to go over these edges and make them a little bit more frayed. And I'm just going to go back right with my ink pad, my Worn Lipstick ink pad, and go right over the edges. And that'll give us that nice bright pink color along the edges that really emphasizes all the colors that we used. And if you have little white pieces still, here you can go in with the actual inking tool itself and just kind of rough those up. There we go. So there is the focal image for this No Stress Distressings tutorial. I'm just pretty much going to make it really simple from here. Just going to adhere it to a card base, put some ribbon right here, and then stamp a sentiment somewhere on the card. But other than that, that's basically, it's all about doing the masking and making the distressings do all the work for you. You didn't have to color anything. All you had to do was cut out this flower, which wasn't even that hard to cut out. It took me it must have taken me like 30 seconds to cut out. So, thank you very much for watching. Here is a picture of the finished card. And here's a close-up of that fabulous distress inking. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Catch you again in a couple of days for the next episode. Thanks for watching.